Good evening. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Welcome to News in Focus. My name is Faraz Patel. We thank you, the viewer, for staying with us here on Hilaal TV, TSTV channel 347. In September 2019, South Africa was shocked and amused or bemused by the killing of Uyinene Mrwetyana, the young student from the University of Cape Town who was raped and murdered at a post office branch in Claremont. It started a new wave of the anti-gender-based violence campaigns that had been formed at that time. And now with the 16 days of activism occurring, many questions are still being asked with regards to what is being done to combat the ever-growing violence that are being perpetrated against women and children. Now, the Uyinene Mrwetyana Foundation is one of those who are not just honoring the life of Uyinene, but also assisting those who are victims of gender-based violence and femicide. Joining us now, I'd like to welcome the mother of Uyinene, Nomangwane Mrwetyana. Mrs. Mrwetyana, thank you so much for joining us here on News in Focus on Hilaal TV. We really appreciate it.
Thank you so much for having me. Hello.
Yeah, no, it's an absolute pleasure, Mrs. Mrwetyana. I think when you reflect on the life of Uyinene, I mean, it was just 2019, the other day, how much of her memory still lives on, not just within the family, but for many of the victims who still continue to suffer from gender-based violence and femicide.
Yes, that is correct. We lost Uyinene in 2019 in the most cruel manner, whereby she went to a post office and she never came out of the post office because of a man who thought that he has a power over her body. And yes, since 2019, a lot of work is happening on the ground in terms of NGOs. We established the Uyinene Mrwetyana Foundation in order to assist or to be part of the fight against gender-based violence in South Africa. And really our work, as you said earlier, what is not only about keeping Uyinene's legacy, but it's really helping survivors of gender-based violence. But most importantly, our main focus is on prevention of gender-based violence. We, as a family, we really would not want to see any other family, experiencing what we experienced in 2019. But honestly speaking, it always feels like a losing battle because we continuously hear about these cases of gender-based violence, let alone the ones who never make it to the media space. Those who go unreported in terms of the media space. But really, our role as a foundation is to ensure that we also assist such families to have a voice, survivors of gender-based violence to have a voice. And our work is really around awareness campaigns to prevent gender-based violence. We have an annual lecture in honor of Uyinene at the beginning of that coincides with her birth month, that is April, whereby we really call in experts in the area of gender-based violence to speak to communities and educate them, on this issue of gender-based violence and to raise awareness around gender-based violence. And annually, we also have gender-based violence prevention walks that we have two. One is always held in East London, that is her hometown, as well as Cape Town during the month of August. Whilst women will be busy celebrating Women's Month in August, we've taken upon ourselves to ensure that we remind them about the fact that we are still in trouble. There's still a crisis in this country. During COVID-19, the president pronounced the gender-based violence as the second pandemic, and therefore, in the absence of COVID-19 as a pandemic, obviously, then this becomes our number one pandemic. And every day it worries me that it's continuing. Feels like we're fighting a losing battle, but we're not going to stop. Every August, we remind the country that someone was lost her life in August during Women's Month. And then, therefore, these are the strategies to combat gender-based violence. We do this in the form of awareness talks, educating people about gender-based violence. And specifically, our focus was on how to eliminate the violence and how to create safe spaces, wherever we are, and how to ensure that our country is a safe country. The vision of the foundation for us is really to see a country that is free of gender-based violence. And we are looking forward to that. And because Uyinene was a 19-year-old, our focus is a lot on young people. We are big on youth development. We work with rural communities and townships to holistically develop young people, especially, educating them in the area of sexual consent, healthy relationships, issues of mental health, and career development, just to ensure that we develop them holistically.
Mrs. Mrwetyana, I mean, you would know, or you would have known Uyinene better than probably anyone else. How would she be, in honor of her, if she were here today, and of course she would have been 24 years old, how would she have looked at this foundation, looked at the work that you're doing as, of course, the CEO, but also as her mother, in terms of empowering ladies from the rural areas, in terms of allowing them a space where they can develop their own skill? How would Uyinene have reacted to this, given the type of personality that she was?
You're touching a very important area, whereby part of establishing the foundation was to really talk about, to use the foundation as a medium to tell a story and to let the world know that she's not only that child who was killed at a post office, she's more than that. She despised, social ills or social injustice, including gender-based violence. If she would hear, she was very inquisitive, very caring, and really cared about, the disadvantaged, or I would say probably the vulnerable and underprivileged. I think she would be very happy. She will be very happy. We have a cousin that was very close to her. And every time we have a program or an event or anything, she will always say, I'm happy that you are honoring Uyinene. Surely wherever she is smiling, because we are continuing with what she stood for. And more than anything else, we are continuing with the fight against gender-based violence, because if you listen to the confession of the perpetrator, he did say that Uyinene fought until the last minute. So we are continuing with that fight, and surely she will be very happy. She will really smile. Sometimes I would be a little bit weary, but I will remember that she will say, Mama, Pusha, that is mom, continue with it. She was that kind of person, very courageous and fearless,
Mrs. Mrwetyana, when I look at, 2019 and how much of gender-based violence cases have occurred, I think when we look at the spaces for South African females, it really is quite, it's quite scary. I mean, just the other day I was reading about, the Uber drivers who are going ahead and attacking women. And, this is supposed to be parts of the society where, travel is made much easier given the state of our public transport. And I look at this and I feel really that for females, and, Uyinene, unfortunately, was really a victim of toxic masculinity and a sense of entitlement from men within this country. we are entering really a dark space in South Africa, aren't we, in terms of just how much gender-based violence has been taken to a whole new level in South Africa?
Yeah, this issue of Uber drivers, it takes me back to the time when Uyinene was missing. Our first suspicion was, I wonder if it's not the Uber driver, because she took an Uber to the post office.
Sure.
And it's quite disheartening, I must say, for us. It's quite disheartening to see, the crime, instead of it decreasing, it's really kind of, it's raising its ugly head, in the country. And it's quite disheartening. It's quite discouraging sometimes. And you feel for these young girls, you ask yourself, where are they ever going to feel free and safe? But I want those who are in the space of gender-based violence to not lose heart. One day we will get there. Let's continue to do the work, in honor of people like Uyinene, as well as all other victims of gender-based violence who lost their lives, through gender-based violence. We cannot give up. For their sake and for the sake of the generation that is growing up. It's really disheartening. And really, I think men must do better. They must really do better. And I do, before I forget, I do want to call on men to please stop this. This is destroying people's lives. It's destroying families. It's very painful.
After the break, I continue my conversation with Nomangwane Mrwetyana as we, of course, touch on the 16 days of activism. Do stay tuned. Welcome back. I'm still in conversation with Nomangwane Mrwetyana, the mother and, of course, the mother of the late Uyinene, and of course, the CEO of the Uyinene Mrwetyana Foundation. Thank you so much for staying with us, Mama Nomangwane. I think what we need to, maybe understand with regards to the wheels of justice, there's been a lot of disappointment from many of the female South Africans in the way this current case of the murder of Uyinene has turned out, that it's taking quite long, that the wheels of justice really are very slow. Earlier this year, Oscar Pistorius, of course, was found guilty of murdering Riva Steenkamp back in 2013. He's now got parole, and many people have argued that this should not have happened given how the actual murder took place. As the mother of Uyinene, what is it that you would like to see from the Justice Department, from law enforcement authorities in really persecuting this person who is currently standing on trial for the murder of Uyinene?
Yeah, it's quite disappointing for us to see how the justice system is managing all these cases. And what also comes to mind as you are speaking about the justice system is what the public protector, during this year, released a report that spoke to how the justice system is disorganized. It's quite disappointing, because this is our last hope. Because these perpetrators, they have rights, and I'm sorry to say, it seems they even have rights more than us. They have rights, and then therefore, if we have to maintain their rights, the justice system must meet us halfway by ensuring that they put their house in order. The Riva Steenkamp case, that was a total a disappointment, whereby someone was just released without the consent of the family, and how they manage things. I've been speaking to June, and she has not been doing well because of how this case was handled. I've been speaking to Lee Matthews' mother.
Yes.
Also the other case about Donovan Naidu.
Yes.
We're speaking as families, and that's what I also appreciate, just to support each other. I cried on the day when Oscar Pistorius was released. I cried. It felt like the perpetrator that took the life of my child was being released. As a mother, as families that have been affected, by this whole scourge of gender-based violence, we appeal to the justice system that they must put their house in order.
Mama Nomangwane, I think part of this comes back to the gender-based and femicide bill, which of course President Cyril Ramaphosa had signed earlier this year. But we've got currently the 16 days of activism, and how many women have been murdered, how many women have been raped, not during this 16 days of activism, but in other parts of the year. And it begs the question of what more needs to be done, not only from us as men, but also from a government perspective. As a mother of somebody whose daughter suffered because of femicide and gender-based violence, what is your plea to government to really make sure that the arm of the law is enforced harshly on those who commit these heinous crimes?
Yeah, Faraz, I think from my side, when it comes to the policies of the country, the establishment of the national policy, the establishment of the committee, and as well as the bill that has just been passed, I always feel that as a country generally, not only in this area of gender-based violence, we are very good at policy formulation.
Sure.
We formulate policies. We are good at sitting in boardrooms and formulate all these policies. But for what frustrates me, it feels like it becomes lip service. The implementation of the policies is where the problem starts. I feel like the government can do better in terms of ensuring that whatever policy that is in place, it gets implemented. Let the government work closely with us. We're on the ground. We know exactly what is happening. We know the root cause, of this. I mean, also from a psychological perspective, as a psychologist, we understand the psychology of a perpetrator and what needs to be done with men on the ground, as well what needs to be done with communities. And I think the main frustration, I'm watching most NGOs, shutting down because of lack of resources. These are the people who go to that old gogo who's in Namakwe, to that old gogo is in the rural of the rural. These are the people that need to close shop because their resources are not distributed fairly. Yes, I'm aware that there are processes in terms of applications and all that, but I think the government needs to treat gender-based violence in the most urgent manner. The way they treated COVID as the first pandemic of the country, I'm calling for urgency because we are really in a crisis as a country, and it is really frustrating. We lost children to gender-based violence, and sometimes I feel like the government or the people, in government, because these are human beings at the end of the day. There's nothing called government. These are human beings. They do not, sometimes I feel like they do not understand the pain that we go through and what will really heal us and kind of give us a sense of calmness. And is when we see that there is some level of urgency in the implementation of policies.
One final question, Ma'am Nomangwane. What would be the one lasting memory that Uyinene would have wanted, but also what this foundation would like to do to really make sure that the legacy that she had left is maintained, but also the legacy of protecting women and children who still remain vulnerable? I mean, where you are right now, the in East London, within the Eastern Cape, it's a difficult place for women and children to live in because there is no real protection, especially within the rural areas. And what is it that you, as the mother of Uyinene, and what Uyinene would have wanted to protect those who remain vulnerable in society, not just during the 16 days of activism, but beyond that?
Yeah, I like the last part of your question that says work needs to be done beyond the 16 days of activism. I think the 16 days of activism, and I respect that it's an international initiative, but I think it needs to be treated as just a reminder. And I like to this year's theme that says the time for action is now. Then that action must be continuous. It must not stay within the 16 days of activism. Surely, if Uyinene and all other victims of gender-based violence were around, they would like to see us doing the work on a daily basis beyond the 16 days of activism. In fact, it's supposed to be, and I remember Dr. Mlambo Ngcuka also shared this sentiment that it needs to go beyond the 16 days and it becomes 365 days of activism. And as individuals, each and every individual, we have a responsibility to be activists in our corners and ensure that in every corner, wherever there is a human being, there is some level of respect and dignity for the next person. And especially with men, they need to call each other out. Uyinene was very open towards her father and brother. She used to call them out. I want them to continue calling each other out to ensure that we live in a just and equitable society.
Mrs. Mrwetyana, thank you so much for joining us here on News in Focus on Hilaal TV. Do stay strong. All the best for your foundation, which of course really tries to assist and empower women that of course are not just victims of gender-based violence and femicide, but also the children who are of course also victims of this. We really appreciate it. Thank you very much.
Thank you for having me. Thanks a lot.
No, it's an absolute pleasure. That's Nomangwane Mrwetyana. She's, of course, the mother of the late Uyinene and the CEO of the foundation in her honor. Now, that's all we have for you here on News in Focus. From myself, Faraz Patel, and the rest of the team in Johannesburg. Stay beautiful, South Africa. Have yourself a good weekend, but most importantly, a safe one. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.